Good morning and good day and welcome to this webinar. And welcome back to those of you who have joined us before. This is the first webinar of this year. Happy New Year to everyone. Happy 2024. And with it, we launch our regular educational program. Before we start on today, we're very happy to welcome a special guest, Tina Mfanga. I'll just mention briefly, Cooperation Africa has been in existence now for over a year. We exist to promote the growth of cooperatives throughout Africa, particularly targeting women and youth to support African aspirations for equitable and inclusive economic development. Over the past year, we've consolidated our structure and developed funding proposals, and we are now poised to embark into 2024, starting with this webinar. The education and training will continue throughout the year. The other main activity we plan for this year is to engage in a pilot study to explore financial mechanisms for cooperative finance. Then we will also be commencing a research program, which will examine the development of cooperatives in various African countries, starting with Ghana. And it will examine both the ways in which people are making cooperatives and the conditions under which they're making those, and explore the enabling conditions and challenges that face those who are already involved in building cooperatives on this continent. So through that, we expect to learn a great deal more about the cooperative movement, and that research will lay the foundations for our ongoing lobbying and advocacy activities, through which we hope to promote the development and the conditions for the development of cooperatives across this continent. So without more ado, I will move to introduce Tina Mfanga. We're very happy to welcome you to Cooperation Africa. Tina is a co-founder and chairperson of the Manzese Working Women Cooperative and the convener of other working people's cooperatives in Dar es Salaam. She's worked as the general secretary of the Tanzania Socialist Forum before that, and been actively involved in social movements, cooperatives, and progressive NGOs. She's been working on themes related to social justice, inequality, the agrarian question, gender and class struggles, transformative economics, and informal labor sector organizing from a left feminist approach. Tina is a social justice lawyer from Tanzania and a researcher and writer. She's contributed 2 book chapters, Working People Against the Free Market and Hawkers and the Right to the City in Tanzania, both published in Kiswahili. She holds a bachelor's degrees in laws from the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania and a postgraduate diploma in sustainable development and global justice from the University of Antwerp in Belgium. So Tina, we're very, very pleased and honored that you have made the time to share with the Cooperation Africa community. And without more ado, I invite you to make your presentation for up to 30 minutes, and then there'll be time for questions and discussions. In the meantime, I invite people to introduce themselves in the chat so we know who we have, and to note down your questions. You can use the Q&A function once we've heard Tina's presentation. Thank you all very much. Over to you, Tina, and welcome.
Thank you very much to Cooperation Africa for organizing this. It's actually an honor for me to be part of this session. If my introduction is already done, then I think I just need to proceed. Comrade Dote told me we'll be sharing the slides. Yes. Yes, so I meant to share not really just lessons from Manzese, but generally lessons and experiences from Tanzania as far as cooperatives as tools of liberation struggle. Then, I mean, during the colonial time and all through the way to the post-independence period to the current moment. And then after then, I'll pick from there the experiences of Uwawama, which is just rose within the neoliberal moment after a very rich history of cooperatives in Tanzania. Well, I guess we all know the meaning of cooperatives, but one particular definition that really captures my attention is the one given by the International Cooperative Alliance, that embodies within it all the features, I mean, the most important features of cooperatives, I would say, being autonomous association of people that have voluntarily united to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspiration, of course, through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. So for me, this is very important to situate it as far as the liberation struggles are concerned, because it gives the features that are different from the current capitalist economic enterprises as we know them. So cooperatives are people-centered as opposed to other capitalist business ventures, which are actually capital-centered or rather capital-oriented. But there is also common ownership and democratic control within cooperatives, something which is not in other capitalist economic ventures. And of course, the production is for the used value, not profit. So cooperatives mean to serve people's needs and not the market needs, which is happening in the capitalist system in which we are existing. And in all those, I quoted actually one of the Tanzanian writers about cooperatives who I think concludes very well about these features, that is only in the cooperative enterprises that the three basic interests, which are ownership, control, and benefits, are directly vested on the hands of its members. I mean, which is again different from what is happening in the capitalist business ventures, where basically workers can not own the enterprise of a boss, you know, neither can they benefit from its fruits, because it's just about exploitation. And that connects me to Marx's ideas that actually a cooperative provide an example of an alternative system within the very same capitalist system, where workers can actually realize the value of their own labor. And having said so, I think these are really organizations that can be looked onto as tools of liberation struggles as far as the working people's struggles are concerned. So the history of cooperatives in Tanzania, which I said I'll start with, because it's very important for me, both. First, because Tanzania has a very rich history of cooperatives, but also because it's very important to give the history behind the current situation of the cooperatives that we have, which is the situation under which Uwawama is established. So Tanzania has a very rich history of cooperative movements, which at one point had a very remarkable success. And of course, at another point, some disappointments as well coming from the governments and as we know. And speaking of cooperative in Tanzania, for the longest period, the agricultural cooperatives are the most dominant forms of cooperatives. And of course, the second dominant forms of cooperatives are financial cooperatives, the SACCOs, so to speak. which actually gained momentum after the neoliberalization, financialization of everything, including money itself. Then these forms of cooperatives gained momentum. So I've divided its history into 4 parts. During the colonialism period, where that is the moment when the cooperative movement started in Tanzania, mainly by the peasants. So we're actually tired of the exploitation of the colonialists within the agricultural sector, and also within the framework of business, because as we all know, there were kind of racialization in everything. So even in the business area, it was the Asians who were dominating that space. So peasants struggled and started establishing cooperatives as a reaction towards this. And as you can see, it's around 1920s that the first forms of cooperatives started to emerge in Tanzania. At the time, not registered, but just shaping up. And in 1925, as you can see, there was that Kilimanjaro Native Planters Association, which was actually not registered at the time. And as the struggle grew, but because it wasn't easy to start even that, there was always a clash from the colonial government because they never wanted it. But as the peasants persisted, then the colonial government just had to give in. And in 1933, of course, after the enactment of the first cooperative associations ordinance in 1932 took place, then the first cooperatives was legally registered in 1933, which was actually a union with 11 primary cooperatives within it. So some writers would say that cooperatives were actually imposed by colonialists, or rather, it was the colonialists who allowed native Tanganyikans to form cooperative unions. But in real sense, it was a struggle. It was a struggle. So at that moment, they actually discovered that they cannot bar people from establishing cooperatives. The only thing they could do is to let them be and see how they could control them. But there's no way they could have managed to stop peasants from forming cooperatives. So the struggle continued, as you can see, and in 1950s to 1960s, that was before independence, Tanzania had the largest cooperative union in Africa. I mean, with all the colonial governments crackdown and the related, but still peasants managed to build a very large cooperative union in Africa. And of course, around 60s, we were Tanzania had the first largest cooperative union in Africa, and of course, the third largest cooperative movement in the world, just behind Denmark and Israel, which was, that was around 1968, and that is as far as the share capital is concerned. And that was the cooperative which was formed by the cotton farmers around the Lake Zone, with their federation known as the Victoria Federation of Cooperative Unions. So you can see with all those setbacks, but still peasants were able to form such huge cooperatives and with a very remarkable success. So during colonialism, cooperatives played both roles. So on the one hand, provided economic and social protection to its members. They managed to build schools, hospitals, there were colleges. At that time, cooperatives actually provided scholarship to peasants' children and so on and so forth. So that is as far as to the peasant it was concerned. But they also played another role because they were, of course, operating under the colonial government. So on the other hand, they also enabled the smooth provision of the raw materials to the colonial government. Of course, there's no way they would have escaped it because they were operating within the colonial system. But one of the important things to note about that period is that the cooperative movement also played a very huge role in the independence struggles of the country, because these were all organizations, I would say, which had organized peasants or other farmers across the country. So it was easier to mobilize for the independence struggles through them. So they played that huge role during the independence struggle. So after independence, in the early 1960s, so the government actually worked hard to develop the cooperatives. Of course, they had seen what they could achieve. With what they had achieved during the colonial period and with all the hard work they did during the independence struggle. So the government actually worked hard to continue developing that sector, and even formed the specific ministry to that effect that would oversee the growth and, of course, the establishment of other cooperatives across the country. And at that time, of course, due to the development of cooperatives, there was a very fast growth of agricultural production. Some writers note that within just a period of 6 years, more than 500,000 tons, of production production had risen to the tune of that amount within just 60 years after independence. So the independent government, together with the importance they gave to the, still inherited the domination of corporate sectors from the colonial government. So also within that period, that period of 1961 to 67, there were a lot of laws which were passed, and of course some previous ones were amended, but to the large extent, all of them worked to control farmers and their cooperatives in terms of production. What they could produce, how they could sell, and so on and so forth. So still they were not left to operate freely and democratically. To be run freely and democratically by the member. The government always controlled it. So in the continuation of the same controlling in 1966, the government formed the Commission for Inquiry on Cooperatives. Of course, some writers know that it was in a way to find more reasons to legitimize government's control of the cooperatives. And of course, after the Commission's report, which among other things noted that there was corruption, members lacked the understanding of cooperatives, of course, also noted that there was so much government interference. After such kind of findings, some changes were made within the sector, which of course continued the government controlling of the cooperative in such sense. So there was the formation of the Cooperative Union of Tanganyika, which was followed with other changes, some of which are affecting the cooperative sector to present. For instance, at that period, one of the changes which were made was vesting so much power to the registrar of cooperatives, so much power that the registrar had the mandate to refuse the registration of cooperative society, to suspend even the democratically elected leaders within the cooperative, control the finances, deregister the cooperative. So some of such features are very important because actually most of them still affect the cooperative to present, as we'll see when I'll be sharing the challenges. So all the way through to the Arusha Declaration, where with the government's direction towards socialism, of course, the cooperatives were also viewed as tools of liberation, tools that could actually further the implementation of the Arusha Declaration. So the Arusha Declaration itself provided to the effect that cooperative would be one of the working people's organizations through which they could own major means of production. So actually the document itself recognized the cooperatives, and the government continued working in the very same direction of developing them, of course, with the very same control. At that time, for instance, villages became primary cooperatives and took over the production, processing, and the related activities which were done by the cooperative societies. And also one of the very important things during this moment is that cooperatives, of course, through the villages, enable the participatory democracy. As I said, because there was control of the government and, of course, by extension, control by the ruling party, there was the ruling party's directive, which was given in 1971, which provided the effect that at the village level, all the villagers have to participate in all the political, economic, and social activities and the decisions at the village level. So this is one of the very important features at the time in which people had that avenue to exercise participatory democracy at the village level. And of course, more cooperatives were established, although by the government initiative, and the control continued. So the Arusha Declaration moment was very important. I just don't have time to go into details of what really happened at that moment, but it was a very progressive moment that had a lot of achievements to the working class people. Although there were some few challenges which are not basically related to the policy itself, but to the implementation of the policy. So all the way down to 1970s, where now, to some extent, the government viewed cooperative as sort of threat. And of course, it is said it's also because of the very huge influence they had and how bigger they had grown. So the government abolished the cooperatives, of course, because of some also other challenges which it had seen, but cooperatives were abolished, and the village government officially and effectively took over the marketing function. And there was also an introduction of crop authorities, which had to take over the function of cooperative unions, and started buying directly from the farmers. So this period really affected the cooperative movement, because the assets of the cooperative, of course, were taken by the government. The cooperative lost their capitals and member, and of course, all the social and economic services or other benefits that were provided to the members now ceased because of that. So to speak, all the achievement or all the milestones that the cooperative had achieved collapsed at that material time. And even the agricultural production also dropped. So the abolition was, of course, for a very short period, because you can see it's from 1976. And quickly, I think within just the period of 6 years, the government, I believe, discovered that it had made a very huge mistake. And then they were reintroduced, but this time already we were already entering the neoliberal era, the 1980s. So in 1982, official cooperatives were introduced, but kept under the patronage of the ruling party, because at that time, villages were sort of the ruling party's political wing, and they were, of course, also had to play the multipurpose role of cooperatives. So you could see actually that there was a direct control from the ruling party. And generally at this moment, the newly introduced cooperatives didn't recover from the loss they had incurred after the abolition. So the loss of members, again, as I mentioned, loss of capital. Now they had no more power to retain the income from whatever they've been selling, so that they are able to grow their capital and so on and so forth. So all the way to 1990s, where the federation was established, but still again under the government control. And at that time, now we had already started seeing how the neoliberal policies would weaken the cooperative, because with the structural adjustment programs, we know how actually all of our government, African governments had to withdraw from provision of the basic services, including the subsidies to the farmers and the related. So cooperatives had been reintroduced with no capital, with less members, of course, no subsidies from the government, and of course they had to compete with other merchants or other capitalist business ventures as far as buying the crops from the farmers was concerned. So you can see how difficult it must have been and how weak they must have been as compared to the pre-1976. So they didn't have economic power, and of course one of the other features which I did include here, there was domination of elites and other rich peasants, I mean, in the villages, as compared to previous where you wouldn't find such features. But of course, also operating under the neoliberal policies, cooperatives became even more corrupt, with less concern of their members' interests. I mean, my comrades and I have been into some research with some cooperative union, especially the peasant cooperatives, where they would give us the stories of how the managers and the cooperative personnel have actually become brokers in the market. So they would take peasants' crops without paying, and they could stay for months, you know, without receiving their payment, which is also very low, and so on and so forth. So generally, under the neoliberal era, with the policies, cooperatives got so weakened, members to the large extent have lost hope in the cooperatives because of what has been happening. And again, there has been introduction, or rather what I call the mushrooming of dependent and exploitative forms of cooperatives, dependent in a sense that some of the groups, or rather loose organizations, which we can actually term them as cooperatives, started being established by the politicians when they promise people to provide them with loans and so on and so forth, especially when we approach the general elections, and these become so dependent that after such moment they all die. Other exploitative, and in a sense that they deviate from the core principles of cooperatives and operate in a manner that actually exploit the members instead of actually members benefiting from the cooperatives. So such is the moment, and such is the circumstance under which the women cooperative of Manzese comes into being. At the moment when poor women, or rather the entire working class, is struggling against everything, you know, social services have been commodified, people cannot easily access capital in their streets, I mean, because most of them are paid traders, they're being evicted from the city centers where they can earn their living. And of course, because of lack of capital, as I said, the only hope, the only place where they could run to is to access loans from the microfinances and of course other financial institutions within the very same system, where they are faced with very harsh realities. The interests are very high, the repayment plans are completely unfriendly. So these are women who have been completely affected by the system in all spheres of life. My comrades and I, for the first time when we started going to the grassroots to mobilize women, some of the stories we collected about the exploitative loans were such that some women had run away from their families, some had died out of depression, others were sick, you know, like such things. So such is the moment and the situation and the circumstances where UWAWAMA comes into being. So UWAWAMA is the Ushirika wa Wanawake wa Ujajasho Manzese, which simply translates to the Manzese Working Women Cooperative, which actually rise within the neoliberal environment, but with aspirations to take a different dimension, a dimension which actually blends the economic production for its members' benefits and also struggles against neoliberalism, because they've been suffering so much under the system. So it was established officially established in 2019, but the struggles to mobilize, to reach out grassroots women and mobilize started way back before that. It was around 2017, if I'm not mistaken. And that was the moment when we had decided to start organizing the commemoration of International Working Women's Day. Of course, we are adding working women because that is its origin. From the working people's perspective, where we would gather with women from the grassroots, to discuss the challenges, share experience of the struggles, make some strategies of how to get out of such situation. And in 2019, which was our third time of commemoration at the grassroots, of that day at the grassroots, then we came up with the declaration, which was called Manzese Declaration. I've shared the link where it can be found. The Manzese Declaration, which, among other things, these women said enough is enough. We think we need to have our own alternative spaces, including alternative forms of economic ventures, which will benefit us and not the capitalist institutions. So it's the cooperative that actually which had the main goal of bringing together poor women to struggle against the economic exploitation of the neoliberal institution. So together with other things, but that was the core objective, that we are going to start a war against the microfinances, against other financial institutions that have been exploiting women, but not just women, of course, and other working class people within the society. And it is basically formed by the pay trader women. So all the members of the cooperative are pay trader women from Dar es Salaam. We have the food retailers. And such kind of women based in Manzese and other neighborhoods within Dar es Salaam. And it was very clear from a get-go that we are going to work beyond economic exploitation, and of course be part of the larger political struggle against all forms of oppression that oppress poor women and the entire working class. So this gives a picture that even from the beginning, the economic aspect was never abstracted from its political part of it, because in so many business ventures, even the cooperative themselves, people tend to treat economic aspects in isolation from its political aspect. So with WAWAMA, it was very clear from the beginning that the economic exploitation is so much related to the larger political situation within the country as far as the existing economic system is concerned. So WAWAMA has been engaged in different activities, if you may call so, but again, in those two dimensions, the political dimension and the economic dimension. So politically, as I said earlier, we have been, like for us, the loans, the exploitative loans are political as much as they are an economic issue, as I said. So the politicization of what happens with the exploitative loans is part and parcel of WAWAMA's work within the cooperative, but also whenever we have engagements with other women groups and other working people organization within which we, as I said earlier, we also participate as for being part of a larger political struggle. And the members have clearly established what they call the popular demands which goes beyond the economic aspect, which is embedded in most of the cooperatives. I've also shared the link here, which if you have time to go through, you will see what are the popular demands that these women are advancing. There are a few photos that show some of the activities as far as the political aspect is concerned. So this was the demonstration which we held towards the commemoration of the International Working Women's Day. It was a demonstration against the eviction of the pet traders within the center. As I said, almost all these women are pet traders themselves. Their children are pet traders, their husbands. I mean, you know how it works. So it was for themselves and also in solidarity with other pet traders who have been evicted. And if you go through the statement of their popular demand, you will see the right to the city for all without discrimination is one of the demands that they are advancing as the Manzese Working Women Cooperative. The other photo actually shows, this was, we launched a campaign for free sanitary pads, which is not just an isolated campaign, but it's part and parcel of a larger political demand for free health services and other social services. It's also within the statement of the popular demands. So even when we convene, we also discuss the reason why the social services have now been commodified. So beyond the exploitation of the financial institutions, how also do we exist in a system where a woman cannot conceive and be happy that they will receive free and better health services during their delivery process? I mean, you have to think of where you get the money, and if not, you are at the verge of losing your baby or even dying yourself. So these are part of the demand. And at this period, there was a motion in the parliament where some of the female parliamentarians had actually moved a motion to demand the removal of tax, which is literally there in the sanitary pads because they're sold anyways. So our take was, it's not just about the taxation, but it's about the commodification of such services, because sanitary pads are about the dignity of women, you know. So such service does not have to be sold. So if we are to get into the struggle about that, it's completely about demanding free sanitary pads and not just demanding that they are not being taxed, because actually if you just remove taxes in the situation where our governments are not even controlling the government, then it's just going to benefit the business people and not even the women that you think that you're intending. And actually that is what happened, because the tax was removed, and after a year, I think it was reinstated because the government discovered that it was actually the business people who were benefiting out of it and not the women. And this is one of the demands that we continue advancing every other day within that large spectrum of demanding the free health service. So politically, we self-educate on the policies behind all such stuff, and of course reach out to other working class women and of course other working class people to build, to collectively build that consciousness, to understand how this system works, to understand the genesis behind such laws and how women and the entire working class is oppressed, and of course together plan the strategies on how we can advance our struggle. But of course the cooperative takes part in the community service activities and extend moral and material solidarity to other vulnerable members of the community, sometimes through organizing solidarity campaigns by ourselves. So last year, during the preparation for the commemoration of the International Working Women's Day, we mobilized members to for the cleanup within the community hospital, and of course provided some of the cleaning materials to that hospital, most of which we produce them ourselves, as you will see in our economic activities. But also, as far as the solidarity campaigns is concerned, in 2020, we were able to mobilize staff from other working people's organization for the Jangwani people. Jangwani is an area which is normally flooded whenever there are heavy rains. So they were victims of flood there, and we organized a campaign in collaboration with other working people organizations. Then we were able to collect food items, clothes, and the related, which were all collected at the cooperative, and we later on handed them over to the victims. We also organized with other working people's groups, like the motorcyclists, the waste pickers, porters, and the related. So basically, politically, Wawama has been a space where other working people also find hope. We have a space, as we will also see later, where other working people can come and convene. But we also sometimes initiate such gatherings and conferences to discuss with them the importance of organizing in cooperatives, because we believe that is the way to go. Last year alone, we held 2 gatherings which we organized for the waste pickers, one of the very marginalized groups within Dar es Salaam, and also the motorcyclists. So that has been part and parcel of what we do politically, but also build solidarity with other like-minded organizations, not necessarily cooperatives, but other organizations that advance the cause of the working people. So the Tanzania Socialist Forum, other peasants organizations, and the related. So one photo shows when we went to deliver the items to the Jangwani people, and the other one, the current one, actually shows one of our solidarity trips to the coastal region, where there are normally pastoralists and peasants conflicts, of course, due to the very same system we are speaking. Investors are being given big chunks of land, and peasants and pastoralists are left with just a tiny portion which they have to fight for. So these are peasants who were organizing to form a union. And of course, I was in touch with them because I was providing some legal aid to that extent. And as the cooperative, we took it as the matter of struggle that we also needed to provide solidarity and organize the trip to that place. So when we reached, that was the first day when we went, and where in the whole gathering, there were only 2 women in that meeting. And after the session, we spoke with those 2 women on the importance of also mobilizing other women to be part and parcel of the struggle. And we kept going to mobilize women, you know, organizing meetings, discussing with them the importance of cooperatives and their participation in this struggle, and so on and so on. So much that currently the union has about 150 members, female members, within this union, which is called WAMI. We also learn, as part of our political agendas, as I said, we also create alternative spaces, which I mentioned earlier. So the marking of such days like International Working Women's Day, for us, the alternative forums where these women meet to discuss their stuff, because such things have been commemorated for years. But in the spaces where these women would never be invited, and even if they get to be invited, then they won't have a space to speak things that really matters to them. So this has been one of our agenda, to organize as many as possible such kind of alternative forums where they could meet and discuss various things. Just last year, we organized, apart from the International Working Women's Day, we organized the Red October, where we met basically to discuss the contribution, women's contribution, among other things, women contribution in the liberation struggles of Tanzania. We even went to visit the cemetery area where Josina Machel, one of the female revolutionaries of Mozambique, was buried, and discussed how women were part and parcel of the liberation struggles of the country, because that is the history upon which we believe our current struggles are built. Because we also build the alliance with other working people's cooperatives. As I said earlier, and I will also say later about the challenges the cooperatives are going through, especially the working people's cooperative. So Wawama thought that it is important to try and build the alliance of with other working people's cooperatives, so that we may speak in one voice against the laws and policies which are unfriendly and weaken the growth of cooperatives. Of course, some of the measures we've been taking individually, but it's not so helpful. For instance, last year in our AGM, we made it clear to the cooperative officer that we will not be participating in the trainings that are being organized by the government, by the cooperative officials, because they are so exploitative and also do not take into account the interest of the working people's cooperatives as far as the trainings are concerned, the language that they're provided in, and so on and so forth. So as an individual organization of cooperative, we said we will not be taking part in them. We'll be organizing our own training, and if need be, we'll be inviting them to come over. But I mean, that amounts to nothing if we do it as an individual cooperative. That's why we thought it's very important for us to build an alliance with other cooperatives so that we may speak in one voice. And we have started the process, at least at the initial stage of meeting and discussing such challenges with these other working people cooperatives around Manzese and see how we can move forward. So those are just some of the photos showing some of our monthly seminars and social gathering activities. Economically, which for us is actually the practical political exercise, because as I said, for us, economic activities are not abstracted from their political base. The cooperative has few collective economic ventures. One of the most prominent is the production activity. Currently, we are involved in the production of detergents, hand liquid soap, batik fabrics, and spices. Of course, still at the small scale, but with that broader vision of, you know, owning our own factory in the days to come, and we believe we will achieve that. So those are just few photos showing very few of our products, which are made during our monthly seminars, because the production is done collectively by all the members. So whenever we meet in our monthly sessions, when our products are sold out, so that particular month we leave it free for the production activities instead of discussions and other engagements. So such are the few products that we produce. And aside from the production, we also have the catering service and a very small liquor store within our space. So we receive tenders from different social events, you know, and also other events that we organize ourselves. So the cooperative, I mean, some few members of the cooperative received the culinary training in the earlier stages, sometimes back when, I mean, in collaboration with some of our friends or some of the comrades who also support the cooperative in solidarity. And we've organized a roster within which each cooperative member participates in such activity in rotation. Of course, within it, they continue learning how to improve their skills, but also actively contribute to the income of the cooperative. And the liquor store, as I said, the very small liquor store within the same space. So both of these are all collective economic activities, out of which members have their dividends at the end of the year. As you can see, those are just very few photos of our services. So in a space where we're based, we also run a social hall, which it is being rented out for social activities as part of the income generation, where we're based in a space, basically in a working people's community. So for us, this whole is part of the income generation, but to the surrounding community, it's also an affordable place where they can also manage to hold their social events. Of course, we all know in coming from the poor neighborhood, they can hardly afford the social hall in the bourgeoisie expensive spaces. So this also provides that service to them. But not just economic purposes, the social hall also plays a political role, because it is, as I said earlier, also a space of hope for other working people. So this is an exclusive home for other working people's organizations. They can freely convene at any moment. So we don't charge any fee for any working people's organization wanting to hold their events or convening their meetings at our space. And all the working people organizations that we are working with, and the new ones that we keep reaching out, the first thing we always tell them that is their home. They can always come to convene whatever they want, and the cooperative will not charge them anything. And of course, again, this is political. We decided to name it after the great Pan-African women, Amy Ashwood and Amy Jacques. I believe most of us know these great Pan-Africanist comrades, in honor of what they were doing together with their partner. And we think symbolically it also means a lot to us as women who are also struggling under the neoliberal system. It means that there are people who had struggled before us, and we're just standing on their shoulders and, you know, to continue advancing this struggle. So that is just one photo of our hall, of the social hall, when it is decorated for one of the social events. So the challenges, some of which I think I mentioned when I was giving the history, probably some of these I'll be repeating, but there is too much government control, as I said earlier, you know, inherited from such changes which were made, as I said. So, for instance, currently we cannot organize our own annual general assembly. They have to be, the dates have to be planned by the district cooperative officers who are government officials. So the only thing we can do is, after they propose the date, is for, oh, I'm winding up. sorry, I'm winding up. So the only thing we can do is just to, you know, propose an alternative date, but generally they have the mandate. I mean, they're the ones planning. Unnecessary operation costs, as I said earlier, related with the inspection, related with the training, and so on and so forth. Limitation of membership based on some legal requirements like capital shares. So under the current context, the member becomes only active when they have managed to subscribe in the capital shares, and that is legally provided. So if you have a person within a cooperative who hasn't subscribed with the share, legally that person is not a member. And of course, due to the previous history and the disappointments, some people find it very hard to believe in the cooperative. So it takes us a lot to convince some to join in the movement. The successes, they're all there. You read, my time is up, but at least to pull our members out of such loan schemes which they were running away. Currently, all our members are not a part of that. Members have been getting new skills through the production activities and the training we're providing, affordable loans and other social protection. It's a space of hope even for members. You know, we're working with women who also have to go through a lot under the patriarch system. So the gathering, the discussions, and getting to know what people are going through provides some hope. Yeah, building solidarity and so on. So some of the key lessons, just some, because there were a lot that we've gathered as Wawama, is that cooperatives are still the best tools for organizing working people towards their liberation, but only they can politically position themselves against the neoliberal distortions of their very nature, because neoliberalism distorts the very nature of cooperative. But also much ideological grounding is needed because of the very same thing. And also, as women, cooperatives also have potential of advancing the struggle against patriarchy. We've had a lot of instances within the cooperative where we had to go and sit with the husbands of some of our members to discuss some issues against violence and related, and they were actually successful with other related issues as far as patriarchy is concerned. But one important thing is that we also understand that cooperatives can hardly achieve their intended objectives under the current system. So it is our duty to also advance the struggle against imperialism. And that's why the motto of the cooperative is cooperatively for a gender equal and a classless society. Because Wawama believes that only the true economic freedom can only exist when we have the society that is completely dismantled capitalism in all its forms, patriarchy, racism, and other oppressive systems, of course. And so Wawama is constantly working to build that society, not just to engage in short-term economic ventures, but has that broad vision. Thank you very much for your time. You strike a woman, you strike a rock. That is the call we took from Winnie Mandela. And you can also follow us on Twitter. Thank you, comrades, for your attention.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Tina. Thank you very much indeed for a very compelling presentation, telling us about the Uamama cooperative and the work you've been doing. Well done. And I'm sure there are people who have been inspired by your example. And thank you also for situating it in the context of Tanzania's history and the rich history of the rise and that sometimes constraints and fall of the cooperatives movement, and then the role of the contemporary movement in rebuilding that and moving forward in the context of neoliberalism. So that was all very, very, very informative and very, very helpful. Thank you so much. If people have questions, please feel free to signal and post them in the chat. There are a lot of responses. Someone is saying this has been amazing. Thank you for a great talk. Are there any questions?
We have one in the Q&A box and we have a hand raised.
Okay. Let's see, where's the Q&A box? Thank you, Letu. Yes, Alfred Aware is asking, thanks for the interesting presentation. Is it correct to state that cooperatives in Tanzania enjoyed relative success during the colonial era and then retrogressed to women-only cooperatives of petty women traders, or Wamama, in the post-independence and neoliberal period? Is that correct? And secondly, what has been the main agricultural produce of cooperatives in Tanzania over the years? And then thirdly, should cooperatives in Tanzania be politically independent, non-party, non-partisan, in order not to attract political influence from the ruling political parties? So that's three in one from Alfred.
Thank you. I'm not sure I correctly got the first one.
Did cooperatives in Tanzania enjoy relative success during the colonial era and then regress to women only in the post-independence and neoliberal period? It's a question.
I wouldn't say it enjoyed relative success only in the colonial era, because, for instance, the huge success I mentioned about having the largest cooperative movement in Africa and the third largest in the world actually happened during the independence era. That was 1968, yeah. Right? That was during the independence, and of course in the early years of the Arusha Declaration.
Okay. So that's the first question. Then what's been the main agricultural produce of cooperatives over the years?
Yes, so there's coffee, there's cotton, you know, of recent years, there's also sugarcane, there's tobacco. I mean, all those, because even from the colonial era, the main produce were the cash crops, right? Yeah.
Okay, and then lastly, should cooperatives in Tanzania be politically independent and non-partisan?
Yeah, so I think cooperatives, by their very nature, are meant to be independent. And what makes them, and I cannot say that they're partisan, but what I meant to say, which I'm ready to be corrected, is that it's actually the government control that tries to destroy that independence of the cooperative. And even the struggle that we're saying we need to advance, it's actually the struggle against government control, against the ruling party's interference, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I hope that answers your questions, Dr. Awere. There's another question from Sally-Ann Decker. Hello, Sally. Sally-Ann. She thanks you for your presentation. And what regulatory reforms would you say would be most helpful in improving the operating environment of cooperatives in Tanzania at this point in time?
What
regulatory reforms would you like to see, and which would be helpful to improve the operating environment?
Yes, so the first one, I gave an example when I was mentioning vesting too much power to the bureaucrats. That is one of the very huge problem, and we think if there are regulatory changes, that is one of the key areas that needs to be worked upon. I mean, the fact that the registrar can just decide to deregister the cooperative, the fact that they are the ones have to, I mean, planning for AGMs and the related, that is one of the key areas that needs to be changed. But also, even within the framework of the regulations, laws, and policies, there should be a clear difference between the working people's cooperatives and other cooperatives, you know, like the employees, or rather the employed cooperatives, because most of the things that we're suffering as the working people cooperatives related to costs, you know, related to how they conduct their training and the related, it's also partly because there is no that clear differentiation of the working people cooperatives and the cooperatives of, I mean, and other cooperatives of other people, which for me, I also believe the differentiation could work, could only work to benefit the working people cooperatives. But if we want to develop the full cooperative sector, then changes need to be made in such a way that all the costs related, all the bureaucracies that add up all costs and the related needs to be removed, so that the cooperatives may, you know, may develop on their own, independent of the interference and for the benefit of its members.
Thank you. Okay, Nana Amamu has a question for you. Are cooperative members in Tanzania considering involvement in political life as MPs or as their own political party in order to improve the prospects for the cooperative movement in the country? Have you thought of embarking on a political career, for example?
Well, I think they are. And there are some of the cooperatives in which I believe they are members of the parliament and the related. So there are such aspirations. They're not just in the parliament, even in other government leadership position. I mean, from the village level to the district, and there are members who also aspires to become that. But the problem is, for the working people, I mean, getting there is problematic due to the nature of politics within the capitalist system, the way they are. But also, even when they happen to succeed to get there, it becomes very difficult at times to be able to effect changes when you're just an individual, or rather just the few of you within either the parliament or that particular position that you've held. So there are people aspiring to that, but I personally don't believe that can really become a solution of all the challenges that we're going through.
Okay, so we should be coming to the end of our time at this point. Are there any final questions? Well, if there are no other questions, we will round up this session.
There's one in the chat that has just come up from Michaela.
Ah, thank you. Michaela Collard. Do you have any recommendations for people interested in supporting similar co-ops and working people's solidarity in other cities? And what are some of the first steps? There's a practical question for you.
Yeah, it's quite tricky because one needs also to learn and understand the particular context and environment under which they will need to engage. But if you ask me, generally, one of the first steps one could take, I believe, could be first going to learn from the struggles of those people and get to first understand the strategies through which they've been engaging in their struggle and move forward from there, while leaving the process on their hands for them to move forward with the process, while playing such supportive role from a distance whenever you can. I don't know whether that answers, but I believe that would be the way. Yeah.
It's a good answer. I have another answer. You should join Cooperation Africa if you haven't already, and become a regular participant in our webinars and enjoy all the member benefits of joining. And perhaps at this point, it's a good time for me to make that call out and invite everybody who's here to visit our website and sign up, subscribe. There's a small annual membership fee, which is part of our economic base. So we invite you to subscribe and join up and join in future activities. We'll be continuing this program of webinars, and as I mentioned earlier, in the year ahead, we'll be embarking on additional activities, particularly the research project. So visit our website, it's in the chat. And with that, I think it is left for me to really thank Tina Mfanga and all the women of Uwamama and Manzese Co-op for allowing you to share with us that rich experience. And everyone here, I for one, have certainly benefited and learned a great deal from you. And we look forward to our ongoing engagement because it's very clear from what you've said that we can benefit from an ongoing relationship with you and indeed with other cooperatives and cooperators who might be present as we move forward in the coming year, which promises to be really exciting. So thank you very much, everybody who's attended. Thank you to our techies. And this will be recorded and made available. And without more ado, I wish you all good day and safe travels, safe and productive time wherever you are.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and Cooperation Africa for hosting me.
Yes, and thank you, Adote, for pulling this program together.
Okay. Bye.